Okay, untap, upkeep, draw.
This is Interplanar Public Radio. IPPR. Bloop, 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 bloop.
How many cards do you think they'll have to print before there is a creature type pervert? How far down do we have to get before we have a exclusively pervert type creature card?
Let's just roll this back.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. You are listening to All Cards Considered. I'm Jesse Batend.
And I'm Dillon Cassidy.
And we are here to celebrate the launch of a brand new set of Magic cards, one of our favorite things in the entire world.
Yes, March of the Machines, or MOM.
MOM is almost here.
Yeah.
We've been spending the last 20 minutes or so flipping through the card image gallery, getting all excited.
Mom is coming home, and we are going to help her carry the groceries in one load.
Absolutely.
We are her
gonna be
big,
the
strong boys.
The best sons.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you feel about it? Based on what you've seen so far, you excited for Mom?
I'm always excited for every set, pretty much.
Yeah, same.
So it's hard to not be these days.
Yeah, same. It's an interesting set that's doing some new stuff. Of course, the big headline is we have a brand new card type, Battles. We all know that.
We've all heard about Battles.
Today, we wanted to talk about the draft archetypes, take a look at some of those spoilers, and talk about some of those new things. So we'll be touching on Battles. We'll be talking about some of the mechanics that are showing up in MOM. And I thought a fun place to start would be to kind of just take a look at the vision, the idea that the design team had going in. So good creatures becoming
bad,
completed.
Bad guys, baddies.
Yeah, and in this case, they also
evil
wanted
little perverts.
evil little perverts. We love them.
God, I love a little perverted card.
And our favorite perverts are the Praetors, and they were like, how do we do more? Which is how we ended up with Saga Praetors.
Yep. So we got normal cards that turn into Phyrexians, and Phyrexians that turn into Sagas.
Yeah, that's true. Everything's flipping and transforming all over this set.
Yeah.
That actually leads us to another first for Magic, which is they have their first double-faced token.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, incubate tokens are a new mechanic that allows you to create an artifact, put some +1/+1 counters, and then pay a mana cost to flip it into a creature. So honestly, we'll talk a little bit more about incubate and how it might play out, but thematically, it's a really cool way to show the Phyrexian army growing and turning machines into monsters of war. DFCs representing planes, which of course ended up as battles. And then the legendary team-ups. I think that was the first headline when people first got a glimpse of MOM. I think I called it
Slime, Foot, and Squeak.
Magic the Marveling.
Got our Avengers moments happening here in this set for sure. Coming together to stop Elishnos and her Infinity friends. Yeah. So
we're getting our first peek at what those ideas kind of turned into. And the big one is battles.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain how battles work for people that don't know? And then give us kind of your thoughts on them?
I would love to.
Awesome.
Battles are dirty little permanents that enter the battlefield attached to an opponent of your choice. And they're going to enter the battlefield with a number of counters. On top of that, they all have an enter the battlefield effect, which is almost all mapped to a sorcery from the past. So they're basically these sorceries that you play that stick around, and then your opponent has to defend them. They can choose not to. When you attack, you declare an attacker that focuses one of them. When you attack them and remove all their counters by dealing damage to them, you can also deal damage with spells and such. That battle flips into a creature a lot of the time, but they all flip into something.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Planeswalkers, that giving you something else to fight over, adding another mini game to the game. And whenever something like this happens, it's a little bit hard to judge, how much impact they're going to have. Let's just start at the basic. Do you think it sounds fun?
So my first intuition is that attacking a battle may be bad.
Yeah.
I could be doing damage to their life total, which is, it really is going to depend on how slow the format is. So if the format is slow, battle's good. If the format is fast, battle's not so good.
Yeah, totally. And that was one of the challenges in designing them, right? Like we would never play battles if they weren't a good instant or a reasonable instant or sorcery from the past, plus the opportunity for some more value.
Something else. Yeah.
That being said, I mean, there's some obvious stuff that jumps off the page immediately, like you can bounce a battle.
Yeah.
So you could get extra value. You could blink it.
All those ETB triggers, you now have a sorcery that you can blink, which could be good in the right situation.
Yeah, not to mention, who knows, maybe it makes those archetype matters themes. We have another card type that can enter your graveyard and stuff that. So here's the thing. I think people typically overvalue planeswalkers. Like they scare your opponent. And I think there's a lot of situations where people attack the planeswalker when they should have just go at their opponent's life points.
I'm thinking of the Nahiri in the last set, which you could probably just ignore the whole game and didn't
totally like
didn't
what,
really
what
do
does
anything.
Do or Tyvar. He's going around punching things, but that's about it. It doesn't matter to us. Like there are a lot of situations where a planeswalker's generating value, but it's not value that's going to prevent you from winning the game or anything. And so like I'm curious to see, I don't think battles represent the same like fear, like players haven't lost terribly to a Teferi that went psycho, or your proliferate deck made 21 planeswalkers and we all lost to it immediately. So like I think battles have to prove themselves a little bit, and it's going to come down to like those. I'm really curious to see what happens pre-release weekend. If you lose terribly to someone who like flips 2 battles on you, you're going to play differently in the next couple games. But it may compel people to like do bad blocks or I think
or bad attacks.
Bad attacks because they want to get the extra value.
Out of the battle. One other thing I think is worth mentioning here is that all of the battles we have right now are of the type siege, which while does not mean that we have others, it means that they've intended to have a design space for a different type of battle, which we don't know what that'll look like. And the other caveat I would add to this is, if I recall correctly, I think that the Magic design team has said that the like design space for planeswalkers is very limited, and that my understanding is that battles are kind of an opportunity for them to try and open up what the design space that planeswalkers occupy is in the Magic card set.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the other mechanics in the set. The other one that comes back is Convoke.
Yes.
Have you played a lot with Convoke?
I remember it from Loxodon Cleric or whatever. Which one of the 5 mana Convoke, all of your creatures that convoke
get a +1/+1 counter.
Yeah, which we kind of have a guy returning like that, but the flyer gives them all a flying counter, which could be pretty darn good to give open up your turn and have 4 flyers instead of 1.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's considered to be a very powerful mechanic.
And there's a lot of it in this set.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
Check the number, but it feels like almost every other card or 1 and 3 has Convoke.
And battles mean that creatures are just going to matter. You're going to need your creatures to convoke out your big spells, and they're playing around with like non-creature spells that make creatures and vice versa.
Yep.
We also have a brand new mechanic, backup. Do you want to explain how that works?
Yeah, backup is pretty interesting to me. It gives a +1 counter to a creature. It could be the creature that ETB'd as well. But then it also shares the rest of its text with whichever creature gets that counter, which is, we all know the keywords is like an easy thing to share, but then sometimes it's like sharing a whole box of text, which is like when this creature attacks, return a permanent from the graveyard or something like that. So while I haven't, gotten my hands on the cards to see what all of the effects are, I think it's interesting. I don't think we've seen something quite the same as this, where we're cloning boxes of text onto other cards.
Backup seems like a very aggro strategy.
Definitely.
And on the opposite side of the coin, the incubate mechanic
seems kind of slow.
Seems like it might be a little slow. Yeah, it takes advantage of the double face tokens we mentioned. The way this works is creatures will incubate with a number, and you create an incubate artifact with a number of +1/+1 counters equal to that number. So if it's incubate 2, you put 2 counters on it. And then you can pay, I believe, I think it's always 2 mana.
2.
Yeah, it's always 2 to flip that into a creature later in the game. So it's a cool mana sink, and you can do it at instant speed.
That's actually pretty nice.
That's kind of amazing. Yeah. So be like, do I want to turn my 2/2 and, turn on my 2/2? Do I want to turn on my 4/4? Like you don't. Yeah. And it's all 2 mana. Ooh, incubate's interesting.
The math just got a lot more interesting on that.
Oh, yeah, that got
sure did.
super cool.
One other thing I'm thinking about now that we're talking about this Can convoke tap creatures with summoning sickness. Follow-up. Since the incubate tokens are already on the battlefield, do they experience summoning sickness when they're converted into a creature?
My guess is that no, they have summoning sickness as artifacts when they hit.
When they first hit the battlefield.
And then their flipping doesn't
trigger it again.
Yeah, it's not like they're
battlefield.
exiled and then returned to the battlefield.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Incubate seems like it could be pretty powerful.
It seems big brain.
And that leads us to the actual draft archetype. So what we thought we would do is go through what Wizards tells us we're supposed to do if we're in these color pairs.
Yep,
and then maybe take a look at like that gold uncommon to get a sense of how that might play out. So the first color pair is white-blue, often the flyers. But this time, it's knights.
Knights.
It looks like it's going to be aggro. We had white-blue soldiers a little while ago, which was a
Similar.
cool variant on
Had
what
a lot
white-blue
of flyers,
does.
and that...
Also found a way to have a lot of flyers. You know, it's going to be a tribal deck, but the signpost card that Wizards has given us is the Tribal Lord, Marshal of Zelfir. It's white and blue. Other knights you control get +1/+1. Pay white and blue and tap it to tap another target creature. So,
Okay, what's the body?
it is a 2/2.
2/2.
Yeah. The Marshal comes across to me as like these kinds of effects are always solid. Paying 2 mana to tap another creature, you know, play him when he's small, pump up all your other things, and then don't attack with him because you don't want him to die anyway.
Yeah, and he's going to be a lightning rod for removal for your other better targets.
Exactly. Yeah, make your opponent spend a removal spell on your 2-drop.
Yep. Okay, I like him. I think he's cute.
Yep, I think a Lord at Uncommon, we've seen them a couple times over the last few sets, and they're good.
Yeah.
Like it's always the same thing with gold cards where you're making a commitment, but if you can get a couple of them, which you certainly can, that makes a huge difference.
Definitely. Also, so it's like if you're playing a 2-drop that has 2 pips in the color, you are not 3 colors. You should not be playing 3 colors, or you're not playing this on curve ever.
That's actually a really good point. He seems like a 2-drop. There's going to be a lot of games where he's just not going to come down until 3 or 4.
Yeah.
The next color pair is blue and black.
Blue and black.
This time, it's all about graveyards. We've seen that a lot with blue and black. Probably a little bit controlling. And it seems like it has a little like mill sub-theme. So it mills everyone and takes advantage of graveyards being filled, including perhaps your opponents. Our signpost card is Halo Forager, 1 blue-black for a flying fairy rogue. When Halo Forager enters the battlefield, you may pay X. When you do, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with mana value X from a graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into a graveyard, exile it instead.
Interesting.
And it's a 3/1.
All right, so I'm already paying 3 mana to play this creature. Is a 3/1 flyer worth it out of the box? I guess it's not bad, but then you have to pay even more. So you're probably looking at cantrip level stuff to try and play this effectively or efficiently.
It sort of is, on its face, it seems like it's offering you like flexibility, because it's like, oh, if you want to be aggro, you can drop it out on 3, and a 3/1 flyer is like pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
And sure, it dies, but it's a flyer. The thing is that what makes the card good doesn't happen unless you're doing the pay axe. And so I guess the question would be, if you are playing this for 4 mana and playing a cantrip or something out of your graveyard, are you happy with that?
I don't know. One other thing which I think is worth mentioning too, looking at this card just for the first time, is that it is pay X mana for any sorcery or instant, so you're not observing the colors of that card.
I also like the idea of being able to steal a removal spell from my opponent, especially if they have ways of potentially recurring it.
Oh wow, I didn't even catch it's from
any graveyard,
which is okay. So that makes that make a lot more sense. That
it gives you a lot more targets.
Yeah.
I also think that on the flip side, this color pair cares about having cards in graveyards. The card you play is then removed from the graveyard.
Yeah.
So sometimes with these kinds of color themes, you're kind of working against yourself. It's like, it's great that your card has flashback, but if you flashback it, then you're losing delirium, etc.
Yeah.
So,
Blue Black has had these in so many sets recently, I feel like, where it's like graveyards matter. And I feel like it's hard to really get it to work. Poor Dimir.
Well, let's move on to another archetype that never changes what it's trying to do. It's black-red. Black-red sack.
Sacrifice.
Yeah. It wants to play cards that generate resources and then sacrifice cards. It looks like it's themed around artifacts, the way it's doing that. The last couple sets have kind of done that.
Incubate.
But this brings us the Stormclaw Rager. 1 black-red for an Ogre Warrior 2/2. Pay 1 mana, sacrifice another creature or artifact.
Love
put
that.
a +1/+1 counter on Stormclaw Rager, and draw a card. Activate only as a sorcery. Ugh. I hate that last line of text. But so much depends on whether or not you can threaten effectively and steal your opponent's creatures.
Yeah. So this not being able to activate on your opponent's turn is big sad.
That's really bad. Yeah.
Really sad. But I did see there's always in every set grab an opponent's creature, do the thing. The additional text on that card is when it deals damage to a thing, get a treasure. Oh. Which is very nice for paying this guy's tax here. So we like that, but still at instant speed, it is not at instant speed, it is a very sad effect. So really it's a 4 mana 3/3. I guess you get to draw. There are a lot of permanents in this set from what I'm seeing. There's a lot of blue enchantments and green or white enchantment effects that pacify, or I don't know what the evergreen version of the minus at power enchantment that blue always has, but a couple of those. So those, this is a good way to get value out of those. Drawing is really nice. So I think this could be pretty good because it's also not limited per turn. So if you have a bunch of incubate tokens you're not doing anything with, paying 1 mana to draw a card is pretty nice.
Sure. And I'm thinking of the Chittering Skitterling from last set.
Where you can only do it once per turn, I think, right?
No, it wasn't once per turn. It was actually it was free. You could just sack a creature, draw a card.
Oh, wow.
You could do it as many times as you want, but you had to corrupt your opponent. So that was the tax
condition.
on it.
Yeah.
So there were some games where you couldn't use your Skitterling.
Yeah.
But there were these games where I'm a little ahead and my opponent is just each turn blocking, sacking, drawing cards,
draw.
and then they find their answer. So that really limits the defensive abilities of the Rager.
Yeah.
But as you're saying, getting a +1/+1 counter and a card plus a cheap sack outlet, these make for the potential of a solid sack theme.
Yeah, I'm also interested in if there's any of those. Red loves the hasty exile tokens.
Yeah.
It's something that's in almost every single set. I'm not sure what the cards are that do that, but there probably is 1 or 2 that do that also.
Sure.
So those are also always going to be a good sack outlet.
Interesting too that red is playing. There's a lot of convoke in red, and so that might take some cards off the table for you if you're sacrificing your creatures. You
need those creatures to convoke. I think when we finish this, we should come back and we should put them on a tier list. We should do a speculation on which one we think is going to be the strongest. That'll be fun.
That's could be our prediction for this.
Yeah, our prediction.
Episode.
Yeah.
And then we can do Ask the LGS on Friday and ask them which of the draft archetypes do you think is best. That'd
I love
be interesting. Yeah, cool. So moving on, red-green, traditionally big stompy tramplers.
Stompies.
This time it's battles, not even creatures.
Yeah.
A lot of battles turn into creatures, so they're giving you some hoops to jump through for your big finishers. But the archetype wants to take advantage of the new battle cards. It looks like the cards are split between making your battles better, giving you rewards for having battles, or making it easier to flip your battles.
Yeah.
Our signpost, kind of all 3 camps. It's a rampaging geoderm for 2 red-green. It's a creature dinosaur beast 3/3 with trample and haste. And whenever you attack, target attacking creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Already kind of cool. If it's attacking a battle, put a +1/+1 counter on it instead.
We like that.
So honestly, I mean, this is an interesting card to evaluate.
Yeah.
My gut kind of says that leaning into battles really hard seems like it might be difficult. Let's just analyze this. Do you think you're flipping multiple battles a game?
I think in Gruul you want to.
Yeah.
So this card's value to me is really going to be dependent on the number of battles you have when this hits the battlefield. And I'm not sure if you're going to want to play more than 1 battle before turn 4. I guess there's like the loot battle in red, which is maybe not a bad thing to play. But do you really want to be playing no creatures until turn 4?
It's got to be, the answer to that has to be no. I imagine that you want to be curving out like normal, creating a board presence, and then playing like trample and haste and any other evasion that you can to like take advantage of the fact that your creatures are bigger.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I mean, you're right. If I'm playing battles for the first time and I go, ooh, like turn 2 battle, take turn 3 off, turn 4 battle, like no, like you'll never flip those.
That's a thing that is not. I'm not sure what the magic number is, but you can't have a critical mass of battles in your deck, because if you're only drawing battles, you don't have a way to flip them.
Right.
So you can probably only run like 3 or 4 in a deck, and maybe that's being generous.
I was just going to ask you how many battles you think you can put in a deck, and it's hard to make that decision, but like my gut says it's similar to enchantments, where you're being greedy if you're running more than like 2 or 3 that really impact the board, or like
I think a lot of them have. Well, I don't know. I have to know all the cards a little bit better than I do right now to really be able to. If there's like a battle that does 3 damage to a creature, you can play that and then not feel bad about it.
A lightning bolt battle would be really good, and
we would like that, and we would play it, Wizards.
Turn out there's going to be one, and we're going to be like, oh well, okay, actually battles are great.
A few moments later.
Okay, so now I've looked at these battles here a little bit more closely. I also have to come back around to this. I think for this deck, and we're maybe getting a little ahead of ourselves here, the critical card for this Gruul deck is going to be this Invasion of Regatha deck card, which is it's 2 and a red battle type of siege. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 4 damage to another target battle or opponent.
Oh, cool.
And 1 damage up to 1 target creature. So that's a little bit of the lightning bolt we're looking for. It like turns into, let's see, a 4/4 with prowess. Interesting. I don't know how good that is in our Gruul archetype. And then if a non-creature
battles
source...
are non-creatures.
They are. You're right. If a non-creature source you control would deal damage to a creature or battle or opponent, it deals that much damage plus 2. So this card really plays well with itself. It really wants to play with itself. It wants to go into a corner and just diddle itself because it's a nasty little pervert.
Turns out battles are dirty. Yeah, man, that is going to be really good. And I don't know how good that card is in isolation, but in this deck, it's going to be the crucial piece. It comes down, it's kind of cool. Maybe flips a battle immediately, gives you another battle to fight over, and then maybe takes out like another creature post-combat, or, you know, a 3/1 or something like that.
So I'm looking, all these battles actually in red mostly do damage to stuff on the board, which is great, which is what they need to be doing to be playable.
Exactly. A couple other things. I think that a repeatable way to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature
is usually good.
That's really good. And
repeatable asterisk in that you have to be attacking a battle.
You have to be attacking a battle. So, right. But I imagine that it's probably hard to flip battles. Like, on average, you're probably getting through with an attack against your opponent for like 3 or 4. You know, when you hit someone for like 6, I think that's considered like, ooh, that's a big chunk. Like, my opponent is giving me an opening to hit them real hard.
Yeah.
So that means that a lot of the battles probably will require 2, maybe 3 attacks to flip. And that means that, you know, getting 1, 2, 3 +1/+1 counters out of each battle, that's the kind of thing that in a limited game can like snowball really, really quickly. And I think that my biggest concern, I have no idea about how they're going to play out, but I've heard other people say this. One of the biggest concerns with battles is that they're kind of snowbally already.
Yes.
Like, they're good if you're ahead on board. They're bad if you're behind on board. And so I could imagine this set being extremely fast and assertive, with the possibility to go extremely long. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They seem kind of controlling. Like, if you can play a couple battles that make it hard for your opponent to attack or force them to block, because that's the other thing. If your opponent attacks, they can't block their battle. So that's actually kind of interesting. They have this defensive, it's like defense by way of offense.
There's not a lot of them. I don't know if this is like in other sets where there's like a guaranteed battle in every pack, which...
They did say there's a battle in every pack.
Okay.
But they're split between all 5 colors.
Yeah. I also think that means battles are going to serve as more of a signpost, too.
Yeah.
There's not that many of them, and I don't know how good they are. It's just so hard to tell.
My guess is that, and the way that I'm going to try and build this deck the first time that I play it, is I'm going to probably try and think of my battles as finishers.
Yeah.
So I probably prioritize ones that I don't have to flip. I can win without flipping. But if I flip them, we're in a board stall. Okay, I'm going to sacrifice a couple of my creatures to get an 8/8 or something like that, you know?
I think it's going to be picked on pre-release.
Yeah, this is going to be the one that everybody tries to force, right?
I got to figure out the one that no one's going to bother so I can get good selection and still lose and go 0-3.
Let's move on to white-black Phyrexians. I don't know that there's that much to say. It's another tribal archetype. And our signpost card is Sculpted Perfection, 2 white-black. It's an enchantment. When Sculpted Perfection enters the battlefield, incubate 2. Create an incubate token with 2 +1/+1 counters, 2 to transform it. Phyrexians you control get +1/+1. So, interesting. Incubate tokens create Phyrexian creatures.
Yep.
So that's important to remember, that you could include incubate in your deck to help you hit your Phyrexian numbers. Giving Phyrexians +1/+1, I mean, that's like adding another counter to all your incubate tokens. My guess is that you're probably going to be doing some backup and doing other +1/+1 token stuff. So this seems like a totally like functional deck, and a lot of it is just going to matter on how good like the 2-drops are. And
yeah, this is tough for me because you're right now looking at this card, vanilla, you're paying 6 mana to get a 3/3.
yeah,
Which is kind of tough. I think you have to have other stuff on the board already for this to be relevant, which, I mean, you probably want to be doing.
Yeah, this deck is obviously going to want to like get on the board quickly and be aggressive in order to take advantage of the +1/+1. And
Our review of this color, it wants to get on the board. Watch us say that for every color.
Yeah, for every color.
I could see this being fitting with Abzan. So we do black, white, green, and because Golgari, our black-green, is also incubate.
Yeah.
And, you know, with green, we get to splash and not be too sad.
Speaking of which, green-white is all about +1/+1 counters. We have Botanical Brawler, green-white for a 0/0, Elemental Warrior with Trample. It enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on another permanent you control, if it's the first time a +1/+1 counter has been put on that permanent this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Botanical Brawler. So whenever you put your first counter for the turn on another permanent, he also gets one. 2 mana 2/2 with Trample that gets bigger later.
Yeah. Backup is going to trigger this every time, which I think white has a good amount of that. There's a number of, we kind of mentioned this, hardened scales effects, where it's whenever you would put a counter on, put an additional counter on. So while that won't trigger this, I think there are situations, there's like synergies there.
Blue-red, on the other hand, is all about Convoke, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
This is the archetype that most commonly likes to sling spells and cantrip and play your instants and sorceries. But in this set, we get Joyful Storm Sculptor, 3 blue-red creature human shaman, 2/3. When Joyful Storm Sculptor enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 blue and red elemental creature tokens. It gives you some creature tokens to start convoking with. And then whenever you cast a spell that has Convoke, Joyful Storm Sculptor deals 1 damage to each opponent and each battle they protect. That's kind of cool.
Kind of cool.
Is it good?
Let's see. We have a 2/3 for 5. Not great to start with. ETB, 2 blue ones. So that's not so bad that we're getting 4/5 stats, 4/5.
Yep.
And it's spread out, which is something we also like.
Usually good, yep.
So I think on rate, this is just like a fine body. I need to look at what, know what the rest of the cards are. And the rest of this text, no idea if that's worth it. Completely. It's going to be, I think this is an incidental synergy for this card. I would probably be taking this for the 2/3 and 2 chumps, right?
Yeah.
And then anything else is just gravy on top of that.
I mean, paying 5 mana for a 2/3 and 2 1/1s, I think that's going to be good. 3 bodies, that's a huge discount on your Convoke spells. A lot is going to depend on whether or not you have a lot of Convoke. Mm-hmm. And then whether or not you have slots to add battles into your deck. I do like the idea of pinging multiple things, though. You play a thing with Convoke and deal 1 damage to both a battle and your opponent.
Could be good.
It's not bad. I think this card might be like sneaky good.
The other thing about this, so yeah, it gives us 3 creatures that can Convoke. But the other thing that is interesting about this that is not an apparent thing is that it gives you 3 attackers.
Yeah.
Which is good for killing a battle, potentially.
That's true.
If you need to do that.
That's
for
true.
Whatever your big blue or red battle is.
Black-green Incubate is our next archetype. It's all about playing big creatures and making use of your Incubate tokens. I imagine you're probably going to want to be doing some ramping so that you have the mana to do it. But our figurehead is Elvish Vat Keeper, 1 black-green creature Phyrexian elf. When Elvish Vat Keeper enters the battlefield, incubate 2, and then you can pay 5 to transform target incubate token you control. Double the number of +1/+1 counters on it. Mm-hmm. So instead of paying the normal 2, you can turn your 2/2 immediately into a 4/4.
Yeah.
For 5. I think this is exactly what this deck wants, right?
Yeah, I'm figuring out, or my thought is that there are probably a handful of cards that are in this archetype that are like incubate 8.
I think what this deck wants to do is stall the board.
Yeah.
And then like pump all of its mana into incubates down the line.
Yeah.
Spend 2 on turn 4 and double spell, like play a 2-drop and flip a token. I think
Yeah.
you're going to do that. Maybe this is just like cool upside if you end up in a situation where you don't have anything to do with your mana, and that's always good.
Yeah, I'd still think that this is a 3/3 for 3 that
Right.
gives you a potential 2/2 token. So it's potentially a 5/5 for 5, which isn't the worst. It's not the best. And then it has this other thing that I feel like there are cards that are intended to work with this second effect here in the box, but I'm thinking that there's a couple of them where you're going to be happy to do that with, and the rest of them you don't care. The one thing I'll say about it is the instant speed is very interesting to me. I think battles are going to slow down the tempo.
Yeah, and also like if you're in that situation where you're ahead, you're playing like red-white or something, and you're beating down, you have to ask yourself, is it worth giving my opponent this value? Because no, it doesn't really matter if they peck me back for 1 in the air or 2 on the ground or something like that. I'm going to win through damage. But if instead of attacking me, they can attack a battle, that might offer them the like 5/5 they need to stabilize the board. And so, yeah, you're right. I think it's going to offer cool, like, new ways to trade with your opponent, where it's like, you don't get my creature, but I'm going to offer you this additional value if you let me get in, and, you know, like, create this dance of death.
Yeah, the more that we're talking and thinking about it now, I think the closest thing to battles that we've seen in the past have been the Saga creatures from Kamigawa. And because I'm thinking about how much it's going to suck to spend removal on a battle once it's flipped into a creature.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking about how great it's going to be after they spend all that time killing all these battles, and then you do a board wipe on all their creatures and all their battles.
Everything is
and
gone.
they're just gonna conscoop right there.
Conscoop right there.
They're gonna conscoop. You heard it here first, folks.
I had the same thought that like Kamigawa was defined by the value that you got out of your sagas.
Yeah.
It was just, none of these are that impressive on paper, but what they offer a deck when you have 4 or 5 of them is it changes the rules of Magic, where like removal is really, really good. Like it made removal worse because you got 2 or 3 things out of every card, and so single target removal was like actually a bad place to be. So it's intriguing. And the other thing that I was thinking while we were talking is, of course, what you can do if you have incubate tokens is swing out with the instant speed ability to create a blocker. So maybe you don't actually care about them, but you can just like stop your opponent from
flipping their battle, killing you.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. We mentioned red-white.
Yes, that's our Boros.
The attacker format. In this particular format, it's all about backup.
I'm excited. I'm such a dork for counter synergies.
Me too.
I will love to play this archetype, and I'll do it all day.
I love making small creatures big.
We love it. We love to see a guy grow.
So let's talk about growing. Mirror Shield Hoplite.
Yes.
Red and white. It's a creature human soldier. 2/2. Vigilance. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a backup ability, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. This ability triggers only once each turn.
I think this card good.
Very good, right?
I like this one.
If you're in this deck, you really, really, really want this. You can give 2 different creatures flying or 2 different creatures indestructible.
And if he's on the battlefield and you're playing a backup card, you already have everything you need to make this work, right?
Yep.
Because you have this guy to target and the target itself.
He also has Vigilance, which
going to be big in this set.
it's going to be huge in this set. Yeah, tell me the theory you shared earlier.
Well, Vigilance is better in Convoke all the time. So we're going to be able to swing with our creatures and then Convoke a spell. And I think there's a good amount of them in both of these colors. There's so much Convoke in this set. So we're really happy to have that Vigilance keyword.
Yeah.
Especially when we're making it a bigger attacker.
Totally. And because he copies the ability, he can copy it for himself. So you could like have a good 1-drop, play this guy, then play a backup creature on turn 3, hitting both of your 2 creatures. He can swing in, then you can tap him to convoke a spell.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting play pattern.
There's a 3-cost artifact that just has Convoke, which is, I think, in these like little aggressive decks, he's just a 3/2 for 3, and playing him for free after you swing out is going to feel pretty good.
So our very last one is green-blue and its transformation. So this one wants to take advantage of all the different cards that transform. We got the incubate tokens, we've got battles, we've got the double-faced creatures, and it, similar to the battle archetype, offers a combination of rewards and payoffs and ways to make those things happen quicker. Our creature is Mutagen Connoisseur, 1 green-blue creature, Vidalcan mutant. It's a 0/5 with flying and vigilance, and when it gets +1/+0 for each transformed permanent you control. So it's a lot like the artifact guy from Phyrexia.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
So what we get on rate is a flying vigilant wall.
Yes,
which
for free
is not great. But one thing I'll point out is the more that we're looking at this, I'm seeing these green archetypes, especially the ones that have the 3-cost or more signposts. I think they want to be in 3 colors. Because the other big thing, so our transform permanents are going to be obviously battles, transform cards, and then importantly, incubate tokens.
Yes.
So I could see this easily in like a Sultai situation where we're splashing black for some of the value cards in there, and doing sort of a stalling game with this guy and getting a little bit more value out of him. But on rate, this is just a wall. So
yeah,
I'm a little bit soft on it, unless there is a situation where you just get it all handed to you.
I think that incubate is going to happen enough that most of the time it'll probably be like a 2/5 or a 3/5.
Yeah.
And that's like, once it gets to that rate, it's actually really good, isn't it? Like a 2/5 flying vigilance that basically just shuts down the air. It can block anything all day long, and then it can peck in without fear of dying.
At least the Gitaxian Raptor was like kind of what this card was like, but Gitaxian Raptor was really playable in this last set.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't have the ability to like change what it is instantly, which was a big part of why the Gitaxian Raptor was so good.
Because in one, the most laughable signpost was the Simic one also, right?
Yeah.
I can't even, he was like a 2/3 flyer and you could pay 2 to proliferate again.
Whenever a creature entered the battlefield, you could pay 2 and proliferate. Yeah, which actually looks like that looks good.
Yeah, if you have, it just felt like a lot of work to make any value out of that guy. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if this is going to be the same situation. It really comes down to that magic number of how many transform cards there are and how many are you going to have played on curve. Obviously, you're not going to have an incubate because that's already 3 mana to flip an incubate before you play this guy, which is impossible if you're playing him on curve.
Yeah.
And transforming anything else is, I think, impossible before he is on the battlefield. Or this card, this Veldican Wizard. I don't know their gender.
This right now is my prediction for the archetype that I like lose to. Like I'm gonna play these guys and be like, oh, okay, whatever, you got a 0/5,
get smoked,
check out, and then just die to a wall of 8/8s. Yep. I really do respect the people that dive into something like this that's least clear. Like you really have to know the cards in the set to know how to build a good deck and say, yes, I want this challenge.
Yeah.
So you know what? If you show up to LGS and you kick my butt with a blue-green deck,
We
hats
love you
off
for
to
it.
ya. Yeah, exactly. Whew. Well, we're through a whole cycle of cards.
Yeah, so let's review. Which our predictions here? What's going to be the pair to beat and defeat?
So overall, I kind of have this feeling that this is going to be a very assertive format.
Yep.
And if you build a bad deck, you're going to lose pretty quickly to like aggressive decks.
Yeah.
That being said, I have a feeling that people will figure out that battles are solid and playable, and they'll figure out how to make the most value of them. And games will be kind of fast in the first couple days, but then I think everything's going to slow down. And I think it is going to be a very grindy, thoughtful, intentional format where you're giving up some sort of value in order to try and get some sort of value, and maybe making like counterintuitive decisions because of all the stuff that's going on the battlefield, and also fear of incubate tokens popping up and other things like that. So I think this might actually be a slightly more like grindy value set, not necessarily a long set.
Which one are you most excited to play? Least excited to play?
I am most excited to see how battles play out.
So you want to play Gruul?
I think I want to try Gruul.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also excited to try Incubate.
Okay.
And see how that plays out.
So my thoughts are that I think that Boros could be really good.
Backup's going to be so fun, dude.
I think it's going to be really fun. But I think that blue-white is probably going to be out of the box, just one of the safest colors to play, because you're going to have solid creatures. You're going to have a lot of creatures you want to play. Blue is in Convoke, and blue has the least creatures, but you're with white, who has lots of little creatures, which you're excited about.
Oh, that's a great point.
One thing I love about this little Marshall guy here is once you know a lot more about him, he's the paid Azorius colors to play him. He's the Lord, and you can pay Azorius to tap a creature. Most of these Convoke spells are going to be sorcery speed, so if you want to be really mean, you can tap one of their creatures.
Oh, shit!
You can be really mean and tap their creatures so they can't convoke.
Oh, that's so good.
So crafty.
You're so right. Okay, I convoke. Oh, no, you don't.
Yeah. If you think they're going to play a big convoke spell, maybe tap them down a little bit and make them sad, which is...
God, that's so
We
funny.
love to do it.
I can't wait to dig into these cards.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I've heard people say that this looks like a really powerful set.
It does.
I'm kind of bad at judging these things, so it's hard for me to know, but it looks like a really fun set.
It definitely does. I think, well, a lot of the cards, I think they're pretty pushed. But I feel good about these predictions. I think we'll have to weigh in again next time.
My last thought is I love pre-release.
We love our LGS.
So much. Like, I like to go multiple times. Sometimes I'll do it twice in a day. At this point, I have like, a crew of friends where like it doesn't matter which one that I sign up for because like one of them will be there.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite parts of Magic. I'm glad that the pre-release tradition exists, and I'm excited to see you all there. Clearly, March of the Machine is a set with a lot going on, not just in the gameplay, but in the literal multi-worlds war of its story. So to get you all caught up, we decided to reach out to our local Loremaster, Tanner Goldberg, and asked him to give us a quick recap of everything that went down in the story of March of the Machine. What we got back, well, you'll just have to listen for yourself.
Hi, I'm Tanner Goldberg, and you're listening to All Cards Considered. When we last left off, everything was pretty much fucked. We resume our adventure in the throne room of Elish Norn, where she's lording her victory over Kaya, Kaito, and Tyvar, the trio voted least likely to be chill when you beat them at FNM. Without any real ceremony or grandeur, Shieldred gets decapitated, becoming the first of the Praetors to die in an underwhelming fashion. Why does her card in the set show her with a cool little bug body despite her dying in the opening credits? These are the questions players are asking, to which I reply, who cares? The card is cool as hell.
Is that so? As Norn's care.
While monologuing at the good guys, Norn makes a show of going through the freshly completed Planeswalkers and giving them their assignments. Jace slips off without any actual discussion because he's a telepath, and as Magic's poster boy, he needs plausible deniability for when all the murder happens. The first real assignment is given to Nahiri, who is sent to Zendikar to retrieve an ancient weapon. What is not addressed in this chapter is how Nahiri gets anything done with swords for arms. Even Edward has his scissor fingers, so where does that leave Nahiri? Next, we see Lucas sent to Ikoria, where no one could care less. Wizards of the Coast certainly couldn't, as they killed him off in a side story. He's eaten by one of the mutate creatures, putting him as one of the shortest-lived planeswalkers in modern Magic lore. This means that 3 of the 5 top shortest-lived planeswalkers were Gruul, so do with that what you will. Kamigawa is targeted next as Tamiyo. Holy shit, I forgot about Tamiyo. That was like a year ago. What? Has she just been fucking chilling since then? Kamigawa is targeted next as Tamiyo is sent to complete her home plane. Ajani is sent to Theros with the message that Theros is important to New Phyrexia, though I've now finished the story and it's kinda never brought up again. There's a strong chance that it's only seen as a priority because Elish Norn thinks the gods are cool, and frankly, same. Atraxa is apparently given the same level of importance as the Planeswalkers, despite the fact that she came out in a supplementary product, and is sent to destroy rather than conquer New Capenna. This is due to the fact that Halo is like Kryptonite to Phyrexians. Kryptonite, for those who do not know, is a fictional material popularized by Three Doors Down. Once Atraxa has departed, we are left with the most important of the completed Planeswalkers, Nissa, due to her connection with the super planeswalking tree Realmbreaker. In a real turn of events, it turns out that power over trees is really important to the fate of the multiverse. It's unclear if this will be impacting Green's power level in Standard at this time. During this roll call, the 3 good guys did in fact manage to escape to no one's surprise. They scurry back to home base to report the events of fucking up repeatedly to the planeswalkers who stayed behind. We then get a full Footloose-style warehouse sequence from Chandra, who is just so mad that no one wants to stop the bad guys. You just don't get it, Mom and Dad! The only ally that she has in her determination to go back to the bad guys' home base is Ren, another planeswalker who has a whole thing going on with trees for those of you at home with the Called Shots punch card. As they planeswalk to New Phyrexia, we get our first indication of a Deus Ex Machina watching them from the wings. Before anyone has a chance to care about that, we cut to Kamigawa where Tamiyo is reading her story magic to fuck shit up royally. We get a pretty cool sequence of Kaya and Kaido saving some civilians before they decide to take on Tamiyo. On the way to fight her, they bump into Tamiyo's rat son, Nashi, who is going to ask his mother nicely to stop the murder. Everyone agrees that this is probably the best plan they have. Unfortunately, Nashi's love isn't enough to save his mother, which he'll probably work out in therapy, so a battle ensues. Tamiyo is successfully kicking the shit out of our heroes until the Wanderer shows up and one-shots them. Nashi, who has just seen his mother killed, notices that there is now a bunch of floating words in the air in the shape of Tamiyo. Without hesitation, he decides that this is his new mom, something that he'll probably work out in therapy. In case you were worried we'd get back to the main plot, don't. Next, we get to hear all about Tyvar Kell punching things on Kaldheim. But because he's not interesting enough of a character to support an entire chapter of the story, we also get flashes of Pia Nalar on Kaladesh and Atraxa on New Capenna, doing very different things. Yeah, so once that shit's done, we finally get back to Chandra and Ren. They happen to planeswalk right to where the rest of the Resistance is getting ready to attack. The Resistance fighters say that they have a mysterious ally who will get them to Elish Norn. Who could it be? Find out right now. It's Urabrask. It's Urabrask. Another Praetor who just doesn't jive with what Elish Norn is going for. But it doesn't really matter because as soon as Urabrask gets them to Elish Norn, they're ambushed by Nissa. Urabrask didn't betray them, he was just dumb as hell. Before things get too interesting, we calm ourselves down by going to the pseudo-afterlife that Elspeth is chilling in. Because she basically grabbed a nuke and ran it away from everyone in the previous story, so she's dead. And for some reason, this noble sacrifice, or maybe the fact that she's kind of an angel? Not sure, but she's so special that she gets to hang out with Sarah for a while, like the planeswalker from Sarah's Angel in Alpha. Really not sure why, but Elspeth is just special enough to do that, and Sarah is important enough suddenly to give out fucking superpowers. So Elspeth is a badass angel now, and swoops in to keep Jin Gitaxis from killing Koth. Like the Deus Ex Machina I'm sure she's been planned on. They're definitely not making this shit up as they go. Also, Urabras is drawn and quartered in the background while this is happening, the second Praetor to be absolutely cucked in their death sequence. At this point, we're reminded that Karn has been here the whole time without any arms or legs, so he spends a good chunk of time remembering how this is all his fault for bringing Phyrexian oil to the plane that he created. Which, like, duh. In the midst of this, Elspeth starts wrecking shop, giving Chandra a chance to get Ren to Realmbreaker, with hopes of having Ren hop into the tree like it's a fucking mech and pilot it to be a good guy. So after a real team effort with lots of important background characters sacrificing their lives, Ren gets to the tree and bonds with it. It's really glossing over a pretty emotionally charged piece of writing, but point A and point B are pretty straightforward and the journey doesn't do much to change the destination in this case. Now that the big evil tree is a friend, Ren uses it to reach out to Zalfir, which has been chilling in non-existence since the early 2000s. She lets Teferi know what's what and opens a massive portal for the army of Zalfir to travel through, despite the fact that it will likely kill her. And like 2 minutes into the battle, Vorinclex, he gets fucking killed. I shit you not, he gets hit with a "she's right behind you," and he turns around for Elspeth to decapitate him. I love the Praetors as characters, and they all get killed off like it's a fucking checklist. 500 words later, Jin-Gitaxias gets knocked into a fucking pool of Phyrexian piranhas by a nameless Zalfir with a hammer. 3 and 4, dead and done, just like that. Fucking Christ. Okay, anyway. Ren uses the last of her strength to somehow swap New Phyrexia and Zalfir. I'll admit I was a little lost at this point. It felt very hand-wavy magic fixes everything, but basically New Phyrexia now exists in non-existence, while Zalfir is where New Phyrexia was. Sure. By this point, Elspeth has kicked the shit out of Elishnorn 7 ways to Sunday, but Karn makes a big show of regrowing his limbs and ripping Elishnorn's head off, like he actually did anything to fucking help. On the way out, we get to see that Ren is dead. The second rule planeswalker to die in this set, but don't worry, she's left an acorn for Teferi, whatever the hell that means. At this point, everyone who wasn't killed or completed is safe, because the Phyrexians all stop working when Elishnorn dies. This was never hinted at before this point, it's truly just a nice side effect of killing her, that now everything is fixed. All the Phyrexians that weren't in New Phyrexia are now in a coma, including Ajani and Nissa, but don't worry, we fixed them too at the last second by having Karn give up his spark. So no more planeswalking for Karn, but Ajani is back. His numerous killings just glossed over for now. It's also implied that something went wrong with healing Nissa, but she's back too. And she and Chandra kiss, which is super cool, but they probably should have done it a few years ago. Wizards was just too worried about hurting their homophobic prophet base. Is that good?
You forgot Quintorius. He got his spark. The little elephant guy from Strixhaven? You forgot Quintorius? Yeah, it's fine.
This has been All Cards Considered with Tanner Goldberg, brought to you by MOM.
That does it for this first episode of All Cards Considered. Thank you so much for listening. A special thank you to Tanner Goldberg for our first ever lore recap. That was a ton of fun. And thank you to you for listening. We don't have social media or anything for the show set up yet. So for now, if you want to talk to us or reach out to us, just, find me or Dillon directly. You could find us. Yeah. Thank you for listening. And until next time,